Like, there are very few rules, which I love.
There's not a lot of rules, and you get to make it what you want to make it, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn Live extraordinary.
That's really where I find my most joy, is when I'm live or on camera, or I'm talking about something that is super compelling and makes me think and makes me uncomfortable. So.
Yeah, so you like being uncomfortable.
Yes, I do.
In the live broadcast format.
I love going live. Sometimes what I'll do is I have a bunch of index cards about topics that I want to talk about. And before I press live, I pick a card, and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm talking about this today. And so I train myself to be able to pull it out of somewhere. And sometimes it's shit, and sometimes it is good, and that's life.
Learn and
am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
It was 10 lessons you need to hear right fucking now.
That's it. And so LinkedIn pops up this thing that says, you should comment on this. I'm like, well, okay, LinkedIn, I will. So one of them stuck out to me as being interesting. So I made that comment, and it just went nuts.
Yeah, it did. And I think that's the beauty of social media, but I think LinkedIn in particular. Yeah. I find, for me, some people love Facebook. I love Instagram a little bit, but I think LinkedIn for me by far has been the place where I'm most comfortable, and conversations get juicy and people care.
Right. Maybe.
Well, I think for sure. I think there are people who are one way on LinkedIn and a complete different way on Facebook, like you just said, because on LinkedIn, the business world is watching. Your boss might see it, right? And so I think
somebody who you might want to be your boss.
Right, exactly. Or your employees. And I think, my experience has been challenging myself to say the uncomfortable things on LinkedIn that maybe my boss might go, okay, not inappropriate, but like, oh wow, okay,
not wildly inappropriate.
Yeah, not wildly. Okay, so yes, fair, not wildly inappropriate. But I think you're right about Facebook. I think Facebook triggers a different kind of behavior from people, for sure.
Just making sure, man.
I couldn't figure out how to turn.
Thanks for thinking about lights. But
yes, thank you for.
Lights is my most favorite and most important thing for me with video. It's I would rather have really good lighting than a really good camera every time.
Gotcha.
Welcome to Education is Painful, the podcast where you will learn. This is a Toro Strategic Production, part of the Engine Media Group, in association with Hearst Digital Media. As my guest today, I have somebody I've really been looking forward to getting on here, host of Defending Lady MacBeth, which is where I first ran across, Vice President of Learning and Development at LocalIQ, which is a part of the USA Today network.
It is.
Okay. You've been on the board of Dress for Success in the past. You have a ton of live broadcasts. Tracy Oswald.
Yeah. Well,
what did I miss?
I mean, a lot, and I hope we talk about it.
I'm sure there will be more. So which one of those? Obviously, one of those pays all the bills.
Yeah. One pays my physical bills, the other pays my mental bills. How's that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have listened enough now to kind of know what Defending Lady MacBeth is, where that title comes from. But in the interest of perhaps expanding your audience a little bit, what is that all about? Yeah,
so it's funny, and I was thinking about, because I knew you were going to ask me this, right? And I knew you were going to, and we've had conversations about Defending Lady MacBeth, and that's kind of like where the set point of our relationship was you reaching out to me like, hey, like some of the stuff you say is a little uncomfortable for me to hear, and I want to keep talking to you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that first. So I want to thank you first before anything.
Oh, you're welcome.
Because so few people have that ability and that vulnerability to reach out and lean in when something feels
I didn't realize I was being vulnerable at the time. But
absolutely, totally. So Defending Lady MacBeth was an idea that was actually supposed to be an immersive show first.
Okay.
And
we're going to talk about
we're
that
going to talk. We're going to talk about it. Yeah. So back in 2012, on a really warm night in August, I worked in New York City. I lived on Long Island way back. It was like a different world, a different time in my life. And a bunch of us as friends where I worked, we would every Thursday go out and do something, right? And New York City had so much to do, and like every week someone else was in charge of picking the thing, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pick something like no one else has picked before. So I'm like researching, right? I'm like Googling, and I came across this thing called Sleep No More. And it was, the way it was described online, it was like, I thought it was performance art, like in a big room, and we would be like sipping cocktails and walking around and like just looking and like having commentary and feeling very cool, right? And like very super cultured.
Kind of somewhere in between the martini crowd, but you have this little show that's going on.
Right, little artsy show.
And it's separate from you. It's over there.
Yes, it's over there. Yeah, it's like, oh, I will observe and judge thee, right? While I'm drinking. And
which is the best way to observe.
It is so the best, right? And it turned out going to the show fundamentally changed my life, Jonas. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not like being kitschy or over-exaggerating. What Sleep No More is a 5-floor, 100-room wonderland set in a huge warehouse in Chelsea on 27th between 10th and 11th Avenue. The story is based quasi-loosely on the story of Macbeth, so the Scottish play, right? It's got lots of other stories woven in, like overtones of Rebecca by Du Maurier, a little bit of Hitchcock influence. It's got like the true story of King James and Queen Anne of Scotland, way back in the 1600s, and it's all woven together in this dreamlike intensity. And what's super interesting is that you don't go and see this show. You actually are in this experience.
You're part of the show.
You're a part of it. So you go, and I might drop a little spoilers, but for all intents and purposes, it's a 3-hour experience. You have to wear a mask the entire time, and you can't speak.
Oh, okay.
You cannot talk.
I did not catch that part.
Yes. The whole entire experience actually is wordless. The actors don't talk as a rule, except for sometimes when they pull you into an intense one-on-one experience, which happens sporadically and sometimes. And what happened was the first time I went, at the end of the show, I came out back into where we started, and I was like, I don't know what just happened to me, but I feel like I saw like the Matrix or something. It unlocked so many things inside me as a human, as a woman, as a person, as a wife and a mother, and so many levels of who I am. And it reflected back to me not only who I was, but possibilities of who I could become. And I know that sounds so trite and sounds so like, out there.
Well, yeah, but that's one of the things I want to talk about. Like why, how does that happen?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things I learned, and I've been back 49 times to see the show.
Right. So I'm guessing it doesn't get old.
Well, here's the thing.
It's not the same show every time.
It's the same show every time. However, like, think about it. It's over 100,000 square feet. It is 5 floors, over 100 rooms. You can't be in all the places at every time.
So it's the same show, but you're not experiencing the same thing.
Because I can make a decision. I could see it like a scene play out in front of me, and then Macduff goes this way and Banquo goes that way, and I'm like, oh, I like one of like Banquo looks pretty interesting. I'm gonna follow him, and all of a sudden he runs up 2 flights of stairs and is running at breakneck speed. And if I want to follow him, I've got to follow him. And I think
committing.
You have to commit, right? Yes. So this is not for. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for people who don't like to be physically and mentally challenged.
Right.
And I think we can talk about this, and we can go down whatever road you like. But what I want to make very clear is what it enabled me to see inside myself was how closed off I really was to other people.
Right.
And what I mean by that is I was like super successful, corporate, Yahoo, whatever.
Right.
But it was like I was just skimming the surface of the relationships in my life, not just business-wise, but personally.
Right.
And how I came to realize this was inside this experience, Sleep No More. Like I said, you have to wear a mask, but the actors don't. And when you are, this close and a foot away from someone who is emoting despair or joy or pain, and you are bearing witness, sometimes by yourself, number one, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
I mean, you could walk away, but you're there to be in it.
Right.
I was unprepared for what it stirred up in me emotionally, what I felt when
that sounds uncomfortable.
It is, but here's the thing. What's
Potentially.
interesting, I had a mask on, so I felt safe.
Right.
I felt anonymous. I felt like, I can witness this because they can't see my reaction to their their pain, their joy, their, and it gave me this barrier to allow me to start to play with feelings.
Right.
And actually feeling them.
Right. It's a safe space for you to feel what you feel.
Yeah.
Right. I wonder how that affects the being on the other side of the mask. The fact that the person that you're emoting for is masked and you don't.
Yeah. So
all you see is the mask. That's interesting.
Funny. I actually, I don't know how I made this happen, but it happened. I interviewed. The third time I went, I had an intense one-on-one experience with an actor by the name of Marla Phelan, and she played a couple different roles over the years in the show, but mostly she was one of the three witches in Macbeth, and in the show they call her character Sexy Witch.
Okay.
Right? There's Sexy Witch, Bald Witch, and Boy Witch.
Okay.
If you know, you know. I'm just saying. And one of these days, Jonas, I'm going to get you and your wife, and we're going to go, and we're going to have an amazing time, and then you'll know.
Yeah. I would love to do that.
It's happening. It's happening. So I had this intense experience with her, and it was like I fell in love with her character and the way she emoted, and she became like when you have like a favorite actor or actress, it's like, oh my God, it's Marla Phelan. She even was cult status for me. Yeah. And when I launched Defending Lady MacBeth, I put out a video on Instagram thanking the Sleep No More community, thanking some specific actors for allowing me to witness their craft. And she contacted me. And she's like, this sounds amazing. I'd love to be on the show.
Okay.
Jonas, I was blown away.
Right.
But somehow...
I can imagine.
It was meant to be.
Doing these shows, I'm starting to get the idea. Yeah. I can understand that.
And we talked about it on the episode. I can't remember which episode, but it was pretty recently. And she said she absolutely does connect with the people. Just because we have a mask on, she can still see our eyes.
Sure. That's fascinating in itself.
And we talked about it a bunch, and she got so much out of the performing in the show from a deepening human intimacy. Which is funny because that's what it did for me. It taught me how to get better at being okay with being deeply vulnerable and human and exposed, even though I was wearing a mask. And I know that sounds super ironic, right? But yeah, she explained all about it on the episode we did, which was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I did listen to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So, and people should listen to that episode because it does lean into explaining a little bit about why you are defending Lady MacBeth. And I'll just say on that subject, I remember reading Macbeth in high school and all the stuff you have to go through with that. And I remember seeing it done fairly well somewhere years ago. And me watching it as a man, there's a lot of nuance there that I don't think I got from that perspective. Maybe because I was more worried about the sword fights. But
understandably.
But it just, in a way, it seemed like, to me, Lady MacBeth in one sense, she is certainly at the beginning is very supportive of Macbeth doing his thing, and then, you know, encouraging might not be the right word, but she's kind of pushing him towards.
Well, she bullies him,
and then, you know, and then to me it always felt like, well, he's the one that's turned into a whiny little. You know, she's still going in the direction that they set for themselves. Right. So it's like, you know, to me it was like, okay, well, why do you need to defend that? But now, after listening, and that, I think, to me, that is part of the awakening that I've had is realizing that that's not the only perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not everybody sees it that way, number one, and even if you agree with my assessment of it, that there's more nuance to it than just that.
I think, and I love that thought, right? The nuances, and there's not one way, there's not one right way to interpret anything, right? But what happened for me is, in going all of those times, there were some times where I would loop Lady Macbeth, and what I mean by that is I would stay with her character all of the time, and I would loop her performance, and I wasn't particularly, you know, Shakespeare was cool, but I wasn't particularly like a big, you know, Macbeth nerd or anything by any stretch of the imagination. But what I started...
I'm glad I didn't brush up on that.
No. What I started to notice was the actor's portrayal of the character and like the intense love she had for her husband, but also her abject desire and ambition. And... you know when you don't really realize you're realizing something at the time, but it's only like later you look back and you're like, oh, it started here. Like I started noticing this. And what it started bringing up for me was feelings as a woman, right, as a Gen X woman. I'm 54, so I'm on like the high end of Gen X. Right. And
that puts me at the high end of Gen X.
Yeah, okay, so there you go. You know, women... especially back then, and even now, and I make these very, very stark and very fervent comparisons between the Middle Ages and today and how women are viewed and treated on the show. But back then, for Shakespeare to write a woman with ambition and desire, the only way he could write her was as a horrifying villain. Right. Because women were not allowed to have ambition or desire for anything that they wanted for themselves. Right. So picture... well, you can't picture being a woman, but I'm just like like picture, you know, a woman back then with like that has a brain just like a man, right? Even though men painted women as, you know, weaker and you know, they were all of the things. The fact is, we have the same kind of desires and wants and wishes and dreams that men do, and driving ambition inside of us to go after it. Except the structures didn't exist back then for women to be able to go after anything they wanted. They had to do it through their husbands or their family, right? And the only role models that existed back then for women were of, you know, pure and very devout and mother and all of that.
Certainly not murdering.
And when you think about it, back then, even like the murdering of a king, which they conspired to kill King Duncan. Back then, in Scotland, I think it was over, like, I can't remember how many years, but like 15 of the 17 monarchs, you know, in a specific time period, I can't remember the years, died either in battle or by regicide. Someone killed them to get their crown. Men killed them to get their crown, which was totally fine. That's how that's how shit got done. Like, that's how, if you wanted something, you went after it. But because it was a woman that wanted to be queen, the only way she could do that was for her husband to be king. And so she was really smart, and she knew she had to convince her husband to do this thing and like keep the pressure on for it to happen. And
maybe that's why I felt a little bit more sympathy to Lady Macbeth in those readings that I did, because it seems like she's having to use, you know, all these tools that are not you know, just go beat somebody up, and being very, very smart, I guess, about how she approaches these things.
And the more I went to the show, the more it started me researching. And the more I was researching past and present and my own experience as a woman, you know, in the world, in corporate, with a family, I got pissed.
Right.
And I wanted to create a work that helped everyone see the truth of a woman back then, with ambition, with drive, with intelligence, and how hemmed in she was by, you know, real patriarchal structures, right?
Right.
That we carry forward today in
Right.
everything we do.
Right.
And that's the whole premise of the show.
Right. Even if they're not enshrined as law or
Yeah.
the customary way forward
Yeah.
is still there.
It's still there. And I also want to say, it's not, when I say patriarchy, I don't just mean white men, right?
Right.
There's patriarchy in the way I think too. And I have to, like, when I started to unlearn some of the things that I believe through absorption of us living and growing up, you know, being a kid in the 70s and coming of age in the 80s, and how things were still back then, right? Women couldn't get a business loan without a male cosigner until like
Right.
1988. Like, in 1988,
Right.
That's like a sneeze ago,
Right.
And so
and I wonder how many men my age, because I just clearly remember, you know, 1988. I graduated somewhere along. I wonder how many men from that time even know that.
Yeah.
Would even have been aware of it.
Right.
Because why would you?
Totally.
Unless your wife came to you saying,
"Can you co-sign my business loan?" Right. So when I originally had the idea for Defending Lady MacBeth, it was a few years ago, and I because I was so enamored with immersive theater, and it really became a way of life for me. And like I said, I've gone to Sleep No More 49 times, but I've also gone to lots of other immersive shows just because now that's like my drug of choice, right? But I thought, what if I create an immersive show called Defending Lady MacBeth, wherein I actually create scenarios to be able to defend her?
Right.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know how to do that, Jonas. Right? Like, I'm not an art major. I'm not a theater major.
Or a lawyer.
Or any of that. I'm not saying it still might not happen, but what I knew I could do was write and talk.
Right.
And that people would listen.
Right.
And so that's what I did.
Right. I think it's been very effective.
Well, thank you.
I mean, but
yeah.
Well, I say that, and obviously I'm, you know, trying to be nice, but
you take the gloves off.
But
Come on.
the reality is, you know, and that's not the only source of my paying attention to these things, but that, you know, listening to that show and some other things, some other conversations that I've had in the past however many years.
Yeah.
Has, you know, one of the biggest examples to me was I had a conversation with my mother recently, who's obviously 20-ish years older than me, remembers all of that stuff very well, but she's very conservative, very traditional, very, you know, a woman's place is in the home, blah, blah, blah. You know, that kind of, maybe not quite that bad,
right?
but we were having this conversation, and we got to talking about some of these things, and it was another one of those moments that are now quickly becoming a drug of choice for me, where I see somebody's shields drop, and what I really, the one that I live for is when the shield drops and there's a ferocious beast behind the mask. And you know, and so we'd been talking, and she'd been, you know, company line, church, and tradition, and I don't remember exactly what it was that I had brought up, but she said, yeah, that's been my life all my life. And I mean, it was just one of those things where, you know, the mask dropped, and, you know, this woman that's been mom to me for 50 something years is now someone who has experienced being oppressed, experienced prejudice, experienced, you know, all the things that women go through, and, you know, it was very moving to me to see that.
It must have been.
and it was also very nice, I guess fulfilling, is that the word to use for that? Because, it was, I guess, confirming that this is a real person who is not just the sum of these conservative values that she talks about all the time. It's just amazing to me how much that I have missed in my and I've thought that I was a fairly enlightened dude, but
it's like you can't see what you can't see, right? And it's these kind of conversations what we're doing right now that help all types of people, whether you identify as a man or a woman, whatever generation you're in, just to have awareness around a different way of looking at something. Like you said in the beginning, like there's so many nuances and people's experiences. And if this conversation could help one person think like, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. Like, then our work is done, right? Like, then we did something here.
That you've accomplished something, yes.
One of the things that's been on my mind a lot is the beauty standards for women. When you think about makeup and hair and all of that, right? And like that you can get out of bed, like you can get out of bed and just roll out of bed and be at work and like you're good, right? Like
as long as the camera's off.
Right, well, I mean, you know what I'm saying, right? I don't have to wear makeup, but I will tell you this: if I didn't, I would not be where I get a lot of, like you said, I do a lot of videos and on LinkedIn, and because I look a certain way.
Hours on this hair.
It looks good. Everyone at home, his hair looks amazing. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't get the engagement that I did.
You get the things like you look so tired today.
Are you okay?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm okay. This is just true. My face.
Right. This is my face.
And
that's true. Yeah.
Especially as I'm getting older, right? There. I got to tell you, I thought I would miss there's feeling like you're attractive, and then there's being sexualized by other people, right? It's very different things, but I've experienced a lot in my life, right? The typical walking past a group of guys and the catcalls and really horrifying things.
99% sure I've never walked past a group of guys.
I mean,
or anybody else for that matter.
It's an experience, and I think.
Which is true, and I don't mean to belittle that.
No,
because that is something that happens.
It's terrifying,
and
you think, because I worked in Manhattan for a lot of years, and you had to walk, sometimes you couldn't cross the street, but you knew, I'm going to walk past, and I would get dressed up, and I have a larger chest, right? Let's just call it what it is, and people it's just the truth, right? People felt that they were entitled to comment on my body and my face, and this happens still every day to women everywhere. And it's for men out there listening, it's terrifying. And what I'm loving is that, because now that I'm older, right, I don't get that as much, and I thought I would be there's this am I still not viable as a woman? But I got to tell you, there's tremendous freedom in it. Yeah. I feel now but it's not happening to me, but it's still happening to my younger sisters at large. Right. So it's just because it's not a problem for me doesn't mean it's not still a problem. And that's also the beauty standard inherently is patriarchal, right? Because it's telling us that we have to look a certain way and do certain things, like put paint on our face, put color on our face. The fact that half the population can just be whatever, and half the population under normal beauty standards has to paint their face with colors. It sounds crazy, right? To be at their best advantage.
I think if that was a randomized sample of the population, the absurdity would become more evident.
Totally. So that's been on my mind a lot, and I don't know if, there's no way that men can know, but it feels like not only do we have to work harder to get 87 cents on your dollar,
Right.
on a man's dollar, we have to also fit the beauty standard that has been laid out for us. We have to do all of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a slightly more humorous aspect that I would like to come back to.
Yeah, totally. No,
But
totally.
but before we do that, I think one of the things that you used a word a moment ago that I think needs to be repeated for this side of the class, because I don't think we get it. I don't think men get it, that some of these things that men do amongst themselves, for one thing, but then do to women as well. And I don't mean physically like assaulting or touching or anything that would be traditionally that you could go to court and say was inappropriate.
Yeah.
But some of the other things that we do are terrifying.
Yeah.
Because was the word that you used, and you're not alone. I have heard that from other people that some of these things are just terrifying, especially if you're alone in a group or in a place that you're not familiar with. And when I think about that, stepping outside of myself, that's okay. Yeah, I see that, but you should just do this. but that's a very masculine way to look at it, and I don't think, and even that, I don't think that's a genetic thing or something that's built in. I think that's just the way that we're taught.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know. I guess to kind of loop back to some of the things that I hear you say right now and at other times are I can identify with. Like there are things that I have felt myself over the years, that I have seen other people go through.
They're like human things,
they're
right?
They're human things. And I think so my first response was, well, but we all have that problem. Everybody gets that. But then like you said, I don't know when that started, when the transition started exactly, but over a period of time it occurs to me that men may have those feelings, but we've built these defenses, not individually, but over however many thousands of years, we've built these defenses for us to feel, to have outlets for that. Not necessarily healthy outlets, but we have these, we have sports and things like that are probably more healthy. And then we have other things of where we rib each other, to the point of things that are really, like, if you just step back and look at it, are really very atrocious.
Totally.
We treat each other really badly, but that's part of building up some sort of wall of masculinity that shows how tough we are.
Exactly.
And that's a difference. And then the other big difference is that and I'm just totally going to get in trouble for saying this, but on average, the average man is just physically stronger than the average woman.
It is true.
No matter, it's the average XY chromosome is stronger than the average.
No, I think that's a
XX
fact. I do not dispute that.
And that puts an inherent balance of power.
Yes.
That is just not there in between man-to-man relationships and woman-to-woman relationships.
Right. I heard a quote, I can't remember who said it. Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to say that, I was going to bring that up at some point. Yes. And there's so much nuance there.
I know.
That to, as a man, Like, I don't care if a man laughs at me, because I'll, worst case, I'll punch him in the face.
Right.
Probably not me, but years ago maybe.
Right.
But but if a woman laughs at me, especially like, and I think that, and I think again with the nuance,
totally.
I think that statement doesn't refer to just day-to-day interactions specifically, but it also, there's all sorts of interactions where if a woman laughs at a man, he's going to feel very injured.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a tremendous imbalance of power between
physically, absolutely. Yeah.
Between being, she hurt my feelings really, really badly.
Right.
And I was listening to a podcast, if you can imagine.
Shocker.
About where they were talking about some things that had gone on around the O.J. Simpson trial long years ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
For everybody who remembers
that.
And one of the things that they were talking about there was that they played up this, this narrative was played up of how that O.J. Simpson was being abused by her. And that was why he was breaking the door down to get to her. And that, yes, there's more than one way to be abused, but there's right. Yeah, there's a tremendous imbalance of power there, no matter how.
Totally. And look, there are cases where women do physically abuse men. Sure. I'm not like that's absolutely happens, right? But I understand where you're going. It's like how do you compare that, right?
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but this is, I guess, is a question for further study on my part, but and maybe you can enlighten me. But how do you manage that imbalance of power without going right back into patriarchy?
Yeah, it's
because I do believe that, and I believe that there's reasonable levels of evidence to suggest that that's a large part of where that started, was especially as agriculture led to more settled civilizations, and you poor women had to start bearing 50,000 children.
Right.
Can't even imagine.
Right. Me neither.
And there, and then there were structures that were being that evolved to defend the women and children first. But that turns into that quickly. It's really obvious in hindsight, at least, that can quickly turn into this patriarchal, domineering social structure.
Right. I don't like. We are. You and I will both be long dead, right? There's no I don't think there's any getting out of it.
Right.
For like centuries until we become like the super evolved species, right? So I think conversations like this, like anything that causes awareness of any time that we can be and even as women aware of our own patriarchal beliefs and those deep-seated tendencies that we have, is important when we can say, I'm doing that thing. Oh, wait a minute, what does that mean? Just questioning, just self-awareness, right? So, I mean, the balance, the lack of the balance of physical, strength and ability, all that's very real. Men are inherently physically, chromosomally stronger than women. It's just a fact. And I don't think acknowledging that purports patriarchy. That's simply science.
Right.
It's okay. Now what? Now that we know that, right? Now what?
Now what?
Right.
How do we build social structures that are both protective but also enable and empower? And that's a tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough row to hoe.
It's tough to it's funny. I think Are you
but that doesn't mean we should not do it.
Right. It's going to be painful because we have to interrogate our own reality and our own beliefs all the time. And people that have not done that, it's really hard for them when you're faced with, hey, everything that I fundamentally have been taught my whole life and I believe and I've been acting this way. If you're like a 50-something-year-old man or woman and you're faced with, oh, this threatens who I have been my whole life. I mean, that's human tendency to protect, like what you know is true, right? Air quotes.
Right.
So it's really hard, and some people don't want to do it, and that's like, are you on TikTok? Have you gone down that road?
I have tried.
All right, so I'm not doing anything on TikTok, but I watch. Maybe probably too much, and I see hope for like the millennial and Gen Z generation. Like I really believe that they are psychologically more evolved when it comes to the balance, right? Like the balance of man and woman and patriarchy and what's not only what's equality but what's equanimity. What does that look like and feel like? I mean, I see hope. I see promise. Right. And just the fact that we're having this conversation, that's hope also.
Yeah, I think the more people have reasoned conversations and be willing to listen.
Yeah.
With full hearts and open minds.
Totally.
Another podcaster said that's what's going to open the door to things changing. All the laws in the world, all the good intentions in the world are not going to fix things because no matter what your good intentions are, if you don't know what the other party even feels or thinks about it,
totally,
how are you going to address any grievance that they may have?
That's right. And there are still lots of schools and school districts out there in 2021 that have dress codes for girls. Cover your shoulders, cover your because the boys can't control themselves, right? Like, and it's 2022, and that's still very prevalent, especially in the South, across the Bible Belt.
I grew up with that as a common theme.
How about teaching the boys to have sovereignty over their body and their minds, right? Instead of covering up, teaching the girls. It's like you're shaming the girls for just being.
Right.
And that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that with my sister. I've seen that with my daughter. And
How old is your daughter? I forgot.
My
I know you
daughter's
told
20
me.
something. Once they're past 21, who cares?
Yeah.
Sorry. So not as much. I mean, I had some input there, and her mother is not as much of because she grew up with the same stuff that we did. But still, I mean, there's still an implicit bias that it's the woman's job to keep these crazy men's desires under control.
Right.
And
we're just over here trying to live our lives, man. like we can't be responsible for half the population's morality. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's another one of those things that is, it just doesn't make sense to say, well, I mean, it's just like when it's two little kids and well, Tommy made me do it. It's like no, he didn't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. You have control over, and we try to teach our kids that in every aspect except for basically sex and lust and teenage hormone craziness.
Right.
Which, really, I still have a teenage son. He's 17. And we have had the conversation. We've had the conversation.
Yeah, the conversation.
And it's, and the thing is, I remember being a teenager. How do people not remember being a teenager?
Yeah, I remember.
It's gonna happen.
Yes.
You might as
Sex
well.
is happening. It's just, yeah.
I hate to break it to
Right.
your mom, but they're doing it.
Totally.
Somewhere, I don't know what they're doing, but they're something's happening.
Right.
And so it's just ridiculous to think that we, by putting an extra inch of fabric above the knee,
right,
that we're going to stop all that. That's
Yeah.
going to take care of it. That's the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
That
It
boys
is.
and girls have been dealing with for
millennia. Crazy.
But by golly, if you cover up the shoulders, because
we'll all be fine.
now I have heard someone, it may have even been you, talk about something about covering up the shoulders, because that's the most.
Yeah.
And I'll say I have seen some very attractive shoulders over the years.
I get it. Totally. Well, that's so funny.
But there's also some truth in that repression also makes things worse sometimes. It also creates the environment that it's trying to avoid.
Well, when you make something taboo,
Right.
It's just
Yeah,
anything.
There's
right?
always going to be somebody who, well, I want to try that.
Right, totally.
If I'm not supposed to do it. But so I mentioned something that maybe is a little more lighthearted on the subject of differences between men and women, the patriarchal things. And
Yeah.
So I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yeah.
I have a mental image, sort of a broad category of mental image of what an attractive man should look like. Right? Now, I'm not especially attracted to men, but I think all men have an image
Yes.
of what an attractive man is supposed to look
Makes
like.
perfect sense.
I have been told by fairly reliable sources that my image and most men's image of what is an attractive man has very little overlap with what women are actually attracted to.
Yeah.
And so that means then that what men are, that the ideal that we're chasing when a lot of us are lifting weights or doing these other things that we're trying to do, is being imposed by the wrong gender.
Yeah.
That we're basically imposing something on ourselves that is not
What women
really
want.
what women want in the
Yeah.
first place. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how much of the makeup and the hair and the dressing a certain way is imposed by men. I know there's some overlap, because there's always some overlap between these things, but how much of that is imposed by what's been handed down or what's been done, told by other women to other women? Because I know there's some things that women do that I just don't see the point of.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so what you're asking is how much of what we view the ideal beauty standard as what other expectations of other women.
yes.
Okay. So I will say.
Thank you for articulating.
Yeah, no. So I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. That's all. So I would say that when I get, if we're going out to dinner, like with a bunch of friends, like couples, I am not dressing for the men. I am dressing for the women.
Right.
Right, but by virtue of what we all see as standard fashion at
All
the
of
time.
my current and ex-wives have told me the same thing.
Yeah,
at
it's
times.
fact. We don't get dressed up for you guys. I'm sorry to
Right.
tell you. Unless I'm going out with my husband
Right.
and I want to look, especially, whatever, I'll put on a nice dress for him.
But if
yes.
it's a group excursion,
Yeah, we're not dressing for you guys. Even when single women go out together, even if they're looking to land dates and hook
Right.
up, they're not dressing for the men. They're dressing for the standard
Right.
right? So that other women see them and they're like, okay, cool.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
But I will say,
because really, if you're trying just trying to hook up, be reasonably clean and smile occasionally.
Right, maybe, right.
And the smiling and the cleanliness is actually kind of optional depending on where you are.
But I think it's important to note that those standards, like what's in fashion now, like women didn't invent, like that comes from companies and corporations, largely run by old white men. So it's still very,
as soon as you say companies and corporations,
it's
you're
done.
talking about rich old white men.
Totally.
Of which I am not one.
Yeah, totally. So the influence is still very heavily there. We simply have adopted it willingly to be cool or to be in whatever, to be in fashion, to be on trend, however it's been marketed. Right. But it's our choice. I'm not saying that fashion is necessarily being imposed aggressively and overtly.
Right.
It's covert and subconscious.
Yeah, they've done a very good job of doing what my dad calls making you think it's your idea.
Right, and that's marketing for anything, not just women's fashion, just like anything, right? Totally.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a good point. That there's so many of these things that we agree to without really thinking about it. Like we just jump on because it seems because it's what everybody else is doing.
Right, and they make it easy for us to jump on.
They make it easy. They make it easy for us to make the choice that they want us to make.
Yeah.
They make it appear that that's what everybody else is doing, and probably some other things that I've on the tip of my tongue 2 seconds.
Well, they trick us into thinking we made the choice.
Right.
Like we're actively deciding to do this when it's like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's just so many of these little classic sales and marketing things that are not even necessarily. I mean, maybe it's because that's a whole other conversation. But there's so many of these little classic sales and marketing things, like everybody else is doing it. I mean, like how many people did not grow up? How many people at least my age did not grow up with the, if everybody else is doing it, thing from the drug free whatever it was.
Totally.
The say no to drugs.
Just say no, Nancy Reagan.
Because there's some other things where making things the easy choice. Like I have used that in business meetings before.
Yeah.
It's like well here's this thing. It looks really good, but it's kind of expensive.
It's super complicated.
And here's this other thing, and it's a little simpler and it's a little cheaper, but it's probably going to fall apart. Now here's this other thing that you could do if you wanted to, and it's a little bit more expensive than this one, but it's not nearly as expensive as this one. Right. And I mean, I'm not suggesting you should do that one, but it's there.
Yeah, it's there if you want it.
And every time somebody chooses that one, I go, yes.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because that's what I wanted to do the whole time.
Totally.
And that's the amazing thing about that little technique is you can know that it's being done to you, and you'll still do it.
Still fall for it.
You'll still fall for it.
Consciously being aware of it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Because it's the right choice. I mean, it's very difficult not to take the easy choice when it's being made as the obvious thing, and it's so difficult to push against those. Once everybody is doing it, it's very difficult to be the one who says, "Well, I'm not going to do that."
Yeah, yeah.
Although it gets easier the older you get.
It really does, doesn't it? It really does.
It really does. Or maybe you just get more ornery in general. But I don't know. I have so many things that I want to ask you about.
So ask me.
We have covered so many of them already.
Whatever I'm here, man.
And we didn't even get past defending Lady MacBeth. One of the things that I've noticed you do on one of your morning live shows is a tarot reading, and really, so Jonathan and I that you just met has, and I did a recorded an episode for a lady who's a witch.
Oh, yeah,
And
cool.
she mostly wanted to talk to Jonathan about baseball rituals and so on, which was fascinating.
What's her name?
Rachel.
That's the one you told me
Wilkinson.
about, her podcast.
Yep,
You told me her
yes, that's
podcast.
right,
I love
that's
her
right.
show. Her show is amazing.
Yeah, she is so awesome.
Yeah.
Like, finally, we finally got to actually talk and have a conversation.
Very cool.
And yeah, so she's going to be on the show.
Awesome.
But anyway, so thinking about all that stuff, I haven't thought about that stuff in a long, long time, and my wife is spiritual, but in a much less formal way.
Yeah.
And so coming across some people talking about that stuff again, and thinking about that, and so I want to hear about your tarot thing, and then we can talk about manifesting and things like that.
Totally. So disclaimer, I'm not like a professional tarot reader or anything, but I did some research. I started researching back in 2017. My oldest daughter, I was looking for a project. I'm like, Cass, what could I just love to research things because it makes me happy. Like, you get that, right?
100%.
And I'm like, Cassie, what could I research that, like, you think I would think was really cool? And she said, Mom, I think you should.
I should ask that.
I think you should research the 12 houses of the zodiac, specifically Hellenistic astrology. And I'm like, okay, sold. I didn't know anything about it. And so I started researching it, and fast forward, it led me down the road of
It's a rabbit hole.
it's such a rabbit hole, like tarot, and I really got into the 12 houses of astrology, and I created a whole framework that I do inside my coaching practice called the 12 houses of life, or the 12 houses of leadership, based on those 12 houses.
That's a cool idea.
It's really cool, and it allows, when you label something the 12 houses of leadership,
Right.
and you don't call it astrology,
Right.
but you follow almost exactly what those houses mean in astrology, but you don't nod to them.
Right.
It's amazing how much people will lean in and drop their guards and want to have a more whole, organic, and sort of mystical conversation about spiritual conversation about themselves, because of what the subject matter lends itself to. And that unlocked me learning more about tarot. Also in Sleep No More, in the Manderley bar, which is the passage you have to go through the Manderley to get into the McKittrick, which is the experience. Right. The Manderley bar, which is also set in 1939. There is a resident tarot card reader that you can get so that kind of ties into the whole Sleep No More thing too. Right. But I want to normalize for corporate people. I don't say spiritual. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in, I'm not a religious person at all, but I fancy myself interested in the universe and the law of attraction and something bigger than me. I just don't know what it is, right? The yearning for what is the meaning of life, right? All of that.
Right.
And so I was really, the first time I pulled a tarot card on a live on LinkedIn was like, I don't know, maybe it was like last year. And I was like super nervous. I'm like, are people going to get weirded out? Like, are people going to be like, oh, she like totally discount me that I had anything credible to offer? And I found the exact opposite. And then maybe there were people that got freaked out, but people like wanted me to pull us a card pull us another card. Because people simply want hope. People simply want a question to ponder. People simply want to feel connected to something deeper than themselves, a deeper wisdom. Right. And so I just kept doing it. And that's really where that came from.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I think the 12 houses of leadership, that's fascinating. The fascinating thing about that to me, having went down the rabbit hole of astrology and not as much tarot, although after listening to Rachel's history of tarot, it's actually much more interesting than I thought it was.
Yeah.
The thing is, because I have a degree in anthropology, which makes you wonder why I'm doing IT stuff. The interesting thing is that there's there's more than one. You alluded to there's Hellenistic
Yep.
astrology, and then there's all these other.
There's mundane astrology. There's astrology from ancient Egypt, from
Right.
India. Like I
Right.
mean, so many.
Even there's even I think it's more of pantheon maybe than an astrology. But there's even in the Americas there were these hierarchies of different things and that mean different things and lead in different directions. And the fascinating thing to me about it is, especially adding that to things like Big Five personality and the other ones that have the 4-letter
DISC and all of that.
DISC and all of those, even some of the older things that everybody's just completely discounted now. That if you give people a framework that has some traits to it, they will find one that I think it's more aspirational, maybe than factual, but they will find something that they can attach themselves to.
Yeah.
And say, this is me.
This is me. Right.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
Which I think is more who I want to be.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe, but what if you desire to be that, you will become more like that. You may not be perfect, but you'll become more like that. I think that, to me, like, I have no idea what's going on outside of in the supernatural world. I'll be the first to tell you that. But I know what I see, and what I see is people respond to things. Whether it's this thing or that thing, they respond to things.
Totally.
And they respond in certain ways. And talking about manifesting, because I'm not a big fan of The Secret or a lot of the other, sort of markety, salesy things where they want you to buy the books and all that kind of stuff. And so that put me off of the concept. But the more I thought about it, and kind of let it simmer in my head, I read a book that didn't, it was just a fictional fantasy book, but in the book, one of the protagonists, she says, talking about an event that happened, she says, it doesn't matter if it was magic or not. The things that we do have consequences and have power in the world. And that just stuck.
Clearly, because you remember it, like you're.
I can't remember names. I can't remember phone numbers, but I can remember quotes. It was by Gordon Bonnet. But the the thing that stuck with me though was that it's not about what you call it. It's not about whether you say it's God's will or it's because your horoscope was aligned this certain way, or because that's what the card said, or it's not. That's our way of understanding it. The fact is, what you do, what you believe about yourself, about other people, impacts the world, and there are consequences to it, and it has power.
Yeah.
And so, that's. And I think the key thing to me, and I'm working this back around to asking you a question.
No, this is great.
The key thing to me is that for any of that stuff to have an effect, have the effect that you want, because I'm even going to bring this back to Sleep No More.
Oh, I love it.
For any of this stuff to have an effect outside of the framework that it is, you have to take it out of there. You have to take it out of the framework. You have to take it out of that safe space where it's just a theory, where it's just an idea, and physically do something in the world.
Yeah.
And by physically, I don't necessarily mean move a table, but
show up with it.
Yes. Thank you. You're so good at articulating the things that I'm trying to say. And so I guess that's where if I'm going to make this into a question at some point is, what do you think about that aspect of it? Is it necessary to to take some sort of action? Do you have to move a table, or do you have to just show up with the attitude?
I think if you're going to move a table, you have to show up with the attitude. I think you can move a table and go an inch in the direction you want without showing up with the attitude. Like if you're feeling really good about a thing, and you feel great, and you feel excited about it, feel no resistance, and you go take an action towards something that has to do with that, you'll get 10 times farther than if you show up, take an action toward that thing with resistance, with doubt, so I'm not saying don't ever take an action unless you feel totally aligned, but I'm saying it's worth it to do the work on ourselves to feel better more,
or spiritual,
exactly, to feel better more, so that more often than not we feel really good about the thing that we're going to do, and we could move it 10 feet instead of 1 foot. That's my belief.
So that's the part of doing the work that needs to happen.
Yeah.
So and one of the reasons that I'm taking this in the direction that I am, is that my wife struggles with depression. One of the things that we have had come into conflict with early on was because I struggle with depression too, but in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And the way she responds is completely different from the way I respond. The way it manifests in action and everything is completely different. And my path out is completely different, but also not. And and finding a way to articulate that, between the two of us, that there's, and there's so many people who struggle with depression and other things that
absolutely,
it's something to think about. And even if you're not like clinically depressed, even if you're just going through a rough spot with something, I think that there's, you can't. I think you can't do one without the other. Like if you show up without the attitude, you're going to keep running into walls, and you're going to keep running into rough patches, and every time that's just going to reinforce that feeling of I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm just a loser, or I'm stupid, or whatever it is. If you don't do the spiritual mental work, you're always going to keep hitting that same wall.
Yeah, and it's gonna feel like shit.
Right. On the other hand, if all you do is the spiritual mental, if all you do is I'm just gonna focus inside,
I'm just gonna manifest and just think about it, right?
And you don't ever do it.
Yeah.
Then you're never gonna get anywhere.
That's right.
You just kind of turn inward and
completely agree.
And it turns into another thing. So what I've found, like through physical activity, which is why it's not the same for everybody, but like just recently, it's been so freaking hot.
Oh my God, so hot.
It is stupid. At 5:30 in the morning, when the sun's still not even up, it is so hot.
It's like you don't even want to be outside.
Right. So this is what I do because I'm such a smart guy. I go outside.
I know, and you run. I know, and you film it.
And some days it's hands on knees. You just imagine you're outside. It is so stinking hot.
Yeah.
And there's just sweat is just pouring off from your hands on. You have your hands on your knees, and you're breathing hard like you do when you and the bugs.
Yeah. Oh my God, the bugs. Yes.
So let me tell you about Texas.
Tell me you live in Texas without telling me you live in Texas.
I mean, it's bad other places too, but when it's so hot and there's these bugs and the poor bugs are so desperate for anything themselves and they're just swarm, so you're standing there and you're sweating, you're breathing hard, and I run in the woods, so it's there's nobody around, and invariably the thought comes to me, just stop. Just quit. Nobody's watching.
Right.
There's no. I mean, I've got my watch, but I don't broadcast that because I'm too embarrassed about how slow I am. but I mean, there's no referee, there's no scorekeeper that's monitoring that, and those, to me, one of the biggest realizations I ever had was that those are the important moments. That when it sucks, when nobody's watching, or when everybody who is watching is against you, or you think they are. That when you're in that valley of despair, where it's the worst it could possibly be.
Yeah.
The single most important thing you can do is mentally and physically take the next step.
Yeah.
And keep moving.
Yeah.
Not just physically, but mentally. At the same time you're moving forward, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. I'm not done. I'm going to continue.
Yeah, and I think, Jonas, you make such a great point, because there are so many times in life that even when you can't see that something's working, it's actually working. Right. Like, even when you can't see proof, yes. and I think 90% of the time when something is working, we don't see proof of that, and like, we're so freaking in it, like, you can't see it. Yeah. I had this experience just today. I did a live. No one was watching on LinkedIn,
right,
and no one was watching on Instagram. Listen, it's not your responsibility. But here's the thing, and when people are watching, like, it gives me more energy. Like, when I know I have a live audience, like, something switch turns on, and absolutely. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's why I love to have people in person to talk.
Totally. But I still did my live, and it didn't feel as good, and like, I wasn't as good as I usually am, and I felt scattered, but I kept going. And there are days when I don't feel like going live. There are days when I don't feel like recording my own podcast episode. Like Erin, like Sia's partner at Innovation Media, like, she's like texting me. She's like, do you have an episode for this week? And I'm like, I have to pull something out of my ass because I don't feel like doing it. Like, you have those times too, right? Like,
yes.
And you just have to keep going because it's working. We just can't see evidence yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally relate.
And and part of that work, I mean, that's the other thing. I grew up Southern Baptist. Yes. There are some good people there, but one of the things that I saw, still see. I mean, I've seen this happen as recently as the last time I went to church with my parents, more than for a holiday. Again, they're going to kill me. But it is, people will want to come and join the church and do the things, right? And some of those people are going to show up because that's what they do,
right?
Like, some of those people are church people. They grew up church people. They're always going to be church people. They're just this is just their thing to do, and it just so happens that they've moved or whatever. Some of those people are people who are desperate.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Maybe they're really, really desperate. They're on drugs and they've got bad problems.
They need help.
Or they've just got some emotional issues or whatever, that they're spiritual issues.
Sure.
Whatever that means. And they come, and there's this place, and they feel the inspiration there. I've been there. That happens. It's a real thing. And they go, and like in most Southern Baptist churches, you have to walk down the aisle and you do all this stuff, and everybody comes by and shakes your hand in the deep South places,
right?
And it's so great, and you can see it on their faces. It's so great. And what I saw over and over and over again is that warmth and that awesomeness that they feel then is gone in a matter of a week. A few days to a week, because guess what? All those happy, smiley people who come and shake your hand are gone,
right?
Because there's no there's no support network there to keep pulling you forward,
right? It's a time base. It's like the moment in time they're there, but
at that moment in time,
it doesn't sustain.
Yeah. It doesn't sustain, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah,
that is not enough. There's not enough of a framework there to keep keep pulling people forward. And I think one of the things that, whether you're a church or a psychology, a psychiatric clinic or whatever, if you don't build some sort of framework to help people keep moving past that epiphany when they realize, oh, life can be better.
Right.
Because let's face it, life's always an up and down.
Life is 50-50. Like 50% of the time it's great, 50% of the time it sucks. Right? And no matter
wherever your baseline is, it's always going to go up and down.
And regardless of how much money you have, your love life, your success, whatever, it's still 50% of the time going to suck.
Right. That was when I was in college. One of the many times. No, this was back in the 90s, I believe, because Kurt Vonnegut was doing the lecture, so obviously he was more or less still alive, and got the opportunity. So first of all, we got the opportunity because of the group that one of the groups that I was in at the time, got the opportunity to have dinner with Kurt Vonnegut and
cool.
And get to see just how much that man could drink. And then knowing how much he had for dinner, watch him give his talk. But it's the standard talk, which he even said that's the same old bullshit I give every time. But he talks about stories, and he uses like Romeo and Juliet and some other classic stories. But it talks about that there's sort of these standard arcs that things go through. And the ones that are classics, the really, really classic ones, mimic real life in that they go up and they go down and they come back to where they were to begin with.
Yeah.
And the reason they're classics is because that's life.
Yeah, and I think we're sold this really false bill of goods that we should be happy all the time.
Yeah. There's toxic positivity.
Yeah, something's wrong with you if you're not happy all the time. Yeah, toxic positivity, and I want to feel all the emotions. Like I want to live a life, and that's why I do a lot of the things that I do, and that's why I take the risks that I take, is because I want to feel every freaking emotion there is, and squeeze the juice out of life until I'm dead, right? And people ask me when are you going to retire? I'm like, I want to keep doing stuff. I'm not looking to
do it till you die.
Exactly. Yeah. But I don't view work or projects as something I have to do. It's what do I get to learn? Oh, what do I get to explore? And how can I feel? And what am I going to create? And so that I can feel sometimes really disappointed and shitty, or sometimes elated.
Sometimes very frustrated.
But really frustrated, yes. And pissed off at people, and how can people be so dumb, and all of the feelings that we have as humans. But I want to feel all of it, and I think that's a big part of what Sleep No More has taught me, is that every emotion is valid and needed, whatever it is. And I was so afraid before, at that point in my life and up to then, to actually feel all of my feelings. And I think that's what I want to help people do in life, is to be okay and trust yourself feeling all the feelings.
Right. I like the way you put that. You're okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel all the feelings.
It's okay. Yeah.
That's pretty good. So I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you still wear the Gary V sneakers?
I have my Gary V sneakers. I just wore them a couple days ago. Yes.
Awesome.
Totally. Oh my God, yes.
I'm really glad.
Positivity and optimism.
Positivity and optimism.
Yes.
Yep.
They're I don't know if it's versions, but they're number 4. He has different kind of sneakers. So this is number 4. So just FYI to anyone who cares.
To anyone who cares about such things. The Citizen M Hotel.
Yes.
In Times Square.
Yeah.
I've stayed around Times Square. I like to stay in Hell's Kitchen myself because obviously I like to eat a lot.
Yeah.
But also it used to be a bad neighborhood back when I first started.
It did, yeah. It used to be, for sure.
And that made it even more fun. But I've never even seen Citizen M.
Yeah. So I started staying at Citizen M back in 2018. I used to do a podcast actually for USA Today. It was called the Growth Lab Podcast, and their the headquarters, like the home office or whatever, was on 50th and Broadway. Right. So Citizen M was like literally right across the street from the office. So I'm like, all right, I'll just stay there. And like I became like such a huge like fangirl about this hotel because it's got these tiny rooms, and that turns some people off. But the rooms are really, really small, but very efficient. And like you're in New York City, how long are you going to stay in your room? Like you're doing it wrong if you need to be in your room a lot.
True.
And I would go probably 5 or 6 times a year and just stay there, and that was like my hotel. Yeah, I miss it.
Yeah,
I miss it.
So small rooms.
Super small rooms. There's also, and this is like, I am like really into smells, and that's huge in Sleep No More. When we go, you'll find out there are sometimes smells. I'll be in like I'll be in a random place, like, I don't know, like a store. I'd be like, oh my God, that's the porter's lab, like that's the porter's office. Like, oh my God, that's Hecate's apothecary. Like there's distinct smells inside that show that just live with me.
There's stuff that trigger memories way back to when I was a little kid. Still.
And so Citizen M has this specific smell, at least the one in Midtown, that's like piped in. You know, they pipe in they pipe in the smells. Right. And it just, every time I went in, I would just start to associate that smell with like, oh, I'm home. This is a fun and exciting time, and it just smells really, really good. I don't know. Like I wish they would bottle that smell. I would spray my house in that smell.
Right. Would it be special if you could have it all the time?
Maybe not. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's kind of that 50-50 thing. Yeah. If you had anything all the time, would you really ever want it?
Right. Well, I found out when I grew up a little bit, had been an adult for a while, that you could eat chocolate chip cookies whenever you want. and after a while, it loses its appeal.
Like, yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
So now I have to time box when I can eat chocolate chip cookies,
and
so
make them like rare enough so that you still like really. I love it.
Well, Tracy, it has been a pleasure. I was so looking forward to it, and I do feel informed and enlightened a little bit.
This was such a great conversation, Jonas. Really, thank you.
You're welcome, and the pleasure, I assure you, was all mine.
Cool.
That was great. Sleep No More is in New York.
It is in New York.
That's not your thing, but it is kind of your thing.
So I am actually launching an immersive adventure mastermind very soon, where I'm going to be mostly for like Gen X high achieving women specifically. That want to. There's
so many things for women that I'm like, oh man,
come on. But I mean, we can go like as friends, like your wife. We can, my husband. We could do like a trip. Yeah. We can go totally. But it's for Gen X high achieving women who want to create that next like highest, juiciest version of themselves.
Okay.
And we're going to use Sleep No More as the spark to unlock all of our senses, our smells, our taste, the sounds, emotions. And then there will be a 6-month mastermind that goes with that. So I'm launching that really soon. So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is cool. I knew you were doing something with Sleep No More, but I didn't know what it was. So I'm glad I had that little slip.
Thanks for asking.
And Defending Lady MacBeth is available
everywhere you want.
All fine podcast providers.
Yes, totally.
As I say,
totally.
And you can always be found on LinkedIn.
Always, I'm always hanging out on LinkedIn.
Something on LinkedIn.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I will accept your connection request. You can DM me, whatever. I'm happy to talk. Yeah.
Yes, I assure you, she is.
It's true, right? That's how we met, right?
Yeah. Thank you again, Tracy.
You're so welcome.
It's been so awesome, and this is what I do this for.
I get it.
So thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
And